So welcome to this episode of the Future Proof Container Terminals Group. Today we got a really interesting guest, Venkatesh Ramakrishnan, aka Venki. And I will define why interesting. It's not only due to his experiences, but also due to his background working at Nokia. And as you may know, Nokia is one of the companies that have been evolving for more than 155 years. And especially at this time that we are hearing more about digital transformation, different industries looking into different level of automation. You know, most of them need a reliable network to enable this type of technology. It's a must for us to be aware of what is all about this technology, how can we deploy this technology, the pros and cons of these technologies, and the most important one, how these technologies will impact our way of working. So with that being said, Venki, welcome to the stage.
Thanks a lot, Chris, for having me, and looking forward to having a great discussion with you.
Great, Venki. And well, the plan for today is that we have put on together some questions here, and type of the most asked questions, not only from your side, but also from our side. And the plan is to share our lessons learned and experiences to all our colleagues worldwide that will be watching this episode. So if it is okay for you, we can start right away.
Absolutely. Let's get the show on the road.
Great, Venki. So for all those that haven't got the chance to work with you or maybe don't know about you, could you share some words about who is Venki?
Sure. So my name is Venkatesh Ramakrishnan, but everyone calls me Venki. So much so that now if someone calls me Venkatesh, usually I start thinking about my parents when I did something mischievous, and then my parents were scolding me, Venkatesh, what have you done? So I'm based out of Munich. I'm married and have a little kid. And apart from speaking about telecommunication, my passions are playing my guitar, playing some tennis, and reading books.
Awesome. And I think we got shared passions over here, especially reading books and all these savvy tech, approach, and really passionate about how technology is shaping our future. So before starting the session and the hardcore questions here, I always like to ask this question, Venki, and how would you define terminal operations in one word?
I would say complex. And the reason I say complex is I think for veterans in the terminal business like you guys, already you mentioned it as complex, right? Like it's super complex, tough operations. So as someone coming from the telecommunication world, it's complex plus complex, because I'm like, wow, this is crazy amount of work and crazy amount of complexity. So complex definitely comes as the main word that comes for terminal operations.
That's awesome. And do you think this complexity is due to the nature of the operation, or is it because the constant changes, you're aware of all the changes we are exposed to in the maritime industry, or you got a different thought here?
So I think that the complexity comes from two aspects. One, the need and the desire of the industry to constantly improve on its efficiency and reduce the costs. And the second thing is that the global supply chain keeps evolving. So just take the example of the current pandemic, or the scenario that we saw at the Suez Canal, I think a couple of months back, where one of the ships had, turned a little and it was jammed for some time. And you noticed how much of the ramification is there across the world, because from, let's say, simple e-commerce items to B2B and commercial goods, all of them get delayed, right? And that's why, simply because of the criticality of how important ports are in our supply chain, I think that's where the complexity comes from. And then the market keeps demanding for, let's say, better cycle time, lower cost per move, for example, more electrification and more environment sustainability these days. And all these things bring the complexity, but also fun kind of challenge in evolving the port business.
That's right. That's totally right. And probably you get asked quite a lot the next question, and is what is Nokia, a phone company, doing in ports? I'm really passionate about your company history. So you share a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. The interesting thing is, I think for a lot of people across the world, more often than not, Nokia was one of the first phones that they had, either during their university or as the first phone that they bought in their job or something like that. So Nokia has had a tradition of transforming its business for, as you mentioned, over 155 years, starting with, let's say, a paper pulp company starting from Finland. So the phone business is what Nokia was really known for in the 90s and the early 2000s. And then somewhere around 2007, 2008, Nokia decided to pivot more towards networking and communication solutions. What do I mean by that? When you look at, let's say, your phone and the SIM card that you have, most likely you will have the SIM card from one of the service providers. What the service providers do then is to come to a company like Nokia and say, can you put these big base stations of 5G, 4G, 3G, all these technologies that enable communication solutions, they ask Nokia to do that for them. And that's how now it's a 23 to 25 billion euro company. And that was our main bread and butter, if you want to call it that, for the last 10, 12 years. Interestingly, in the last 4 years or so, we see more and more demand for, let's say, communication solutions from the enterprise side. So whether we speak about ports, but also we have mining, aviation, railways, utilities. These are all industries which now realize that they want to go for more and more digitalization. And at the end, the digitalization relies on reliable network. And that's where the enterprise part of Nokia comes in. And Nokia has been quite active in the port industry because we also see a strong digital transformation happening in this industry. And we see Nokia playing a role of the network infrastructure that can enable this digital transformation.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Venki. So Venki, what challenges do you see in terminal operations, and how Nokia and your team is trying to solve those current challenges?
So when we spoke with, let's say, a lot of the terminal operators across the world, what we noticed, there were some regular challenges. So as you know, a port terminal environment is a very metallic environment because of the ships, the big ship-to-shore cranes or straddle carriers or reach stackers, etc. And then, of course, you have the containers. So the challenge that usually a lot of terminals face is that when they are trying to connect their devices, let's say, to the terminal operating system, a lot of times the connectivity with, let's say, the current Wi-Fi, for example, is not available. And that impacts the business because if you look at some of the latest terminal operating systems, they have real-time information update. And if you, as a worker going between two huge container stacks, lose the connectivity, you will not know, let's say, what the next job is that is planned for you. So that's one of the basic asks when terminal operators contact us saying that, do you have a network solution that can help us get better connectivity? Simply that. Nothing more, just simple connectivity. But now we also have a lot of terminals who have aggressive ambitions on automation. They want to have either remote controlling of ship-to-shore cranes. They want to have wireless connectivity for, let's say, automated straddle carriers. And in such scenarios, you also are looking for something called low latency. What low latency means is from the time when, let's say, the equipment is trying to connect, let's say, to the main server room, to the time when the server room is responding back to that crane or that equipment, how much time do you need? If it takes 1 second, that's too much. If it even takes half a second, it's too much. And now we are talking about latency of, let's say, less than 100 millisecond or 50 millisecond. And such requirements you will not get fulfilled with, let's say, simple off-the-shelf Wi-Fi solutions. And this is where Nokia then decided such requirements need a very specific solution. And we came with something called private mobile networks. So private mobile networks are nothing else but regular mobile networks. But instead of deploying it at a city level, you are talking about deploying it at just the terminal. And the complete control of the network is given to the port authority or the port terminal itself. So let's say we take any big terminal operator and they have, let's say, a 5 square kilometer big terminal. You deploy, let's say, your own mobile network with your own SIM cards, and anyone outside of that network will not be able to get in or connect to that network or get access. But the people who are inside that network will get high level reliability, low latency, customized setup so that you have connectivity everywhere, etc. And that's how we kind of approach this particular challenge from the industry, if you want to call it.
Yeah, you had mentioned so many interesting topics here that we must take a chance and break it down into small pieces, so all the worldwide colleagues can dip a little bit more on what we are talking about. We are daily, on a daily basis discussing this topic, but it will be great if we can keep it not such in a technical way, but if we can go through them to explain each concept. And I got here some of the typical questions probably you will get asked, like you already mentioned the decision making, and you need real-time data, but to get this real-time data you need a reliable network.
Yes,
that's quite important. You also mentioned the latency to enable different level of automation. That's also quite tricky, because you will depend on different type of spectrums worldwide, on the infrastructure on specific countries. So that's really interesting topic. We are also evaluating these days, LTE, 4G, 5G. What's the difference? That will be also interesting to discuss. What is the difference between a private versus a public network? When do I need a private? From the CapEx point of view, does it make sense? So probably we can start like defining what is the difference between a private and a public network here.
So usually the way a public network works is, let's take a big city, for example, right? So let's take Munich, for example, and there is a service provider. They would, for example, apply to the government in Germany to get the spectrum, like licensed spectrum, which is the airwaves on which, let's say, you are using the frequency. And then let's say this company, the service provider, they decide that, okay, I want to sell SIM cards to each and every citizen in Munich. So they will have, let's say, one main brain of the network, which we call it the core, which will be, let's say, at their office, headquarters, whatever. And then they will have small or big radio towers everywhere. So usually when you're going on the highway, sometimes you see these big towers, right? These are usually installed by this service provider. And then they will have SIM cards, maybe 1 million, 2 million, 3 million SIM cards that they are selling to you, me, and we all get the same treatment. It's not like, if, let's say, you are living in the city, so you have better connectivity, and I live in the village where maybe the connectivity is not good, it would not make a difference to, let's say, the service provider, because they will say, okay, I will try to put as much network as possible, but I will not customize my network just because Venki lives in a village. A private network is a network that is built specifically for a particular enterprise customer in mind. So now imagine, instead of Munich, you have a terminal operator who decides that at my particular terminal, I want to have my own SIM cards. I want to make sure that the coverage is there at the quay area, but also at the container stacking yard. Also, I need the connectivity at the office, etc., etc. Then the terminal operator can literally tell that, okay, I need one small base station here, one there, etc., to make sure that the coverage is covering all the use cases that are important for the terminal. And luckily now that the base stations no longer are these huge tower equipment. Now you can have sometimes the access point, you call it, or radio access point. They are as small as this. So it makes it easy for enterprise customers to also just buy it as a smaller equipment and just put it at different locations. And also the complexity of network management has reduced. So from, let's say, complex multi-million subscriber network, now you can have a small network which you can literally carry in a suitcase, which can cover 100, 200 SIM cards. And in our experience, usually if you look at a terminal, you are talking about anywhere between 100 to 900 or 1000 SIM cards that go into either handheld devices, maybe on the cranes, maybe on the video cameras, etc., etc. So that's the main difference between a private and a public network.
Yeah, and I also get asked, like, the tricky part here is to identify where can I deploy this public network within my terminal, and on which cases I must have a private network.
Yes.
Any thoughts about this one?
Yes. So there are two main criteria. So one you, I think, already mentioned, which is the CAPEX or the business case topic. And the second one is the availability of something called the licensed spectrum. So the way it works is spectrum is a national commodity of every government or every nation. And usually what the governments are doing is they are releasing certain spectrum which can be only used by a particular player. And in most of the cases, service providers spend sometimes billions of euros to buy the spectrum. You must have seen in your news this auction, etc. Now, in scenarios where the government has still not provided licensed spectrum for enterprises, you need to ask for the spectrum from the service provider. And maybe they are able to offer it, maybe they are not able to offer it. If they are not able to offer it, then you would need to use the public network, because you cannot have a private mobile network if you don't have let's say, a dedicated spectrum. But then there are some countries, for example, this is becoming slowly the trend in more and more countries, Germany, France, then you talk about US, Japan, South Korea, more and more countries, UK, more and more countries are now slowly saying that we realize industries need their own private networks, and for that they need their own licensed spectrum. So they are allocating some small spectrum for themselves. So that's the number one. The number two is the CAPEX. Let's say if you are talking about a port terminal where you are dealing with maybe 50,000 TEU load, or maybe 100,000 or less than 200,000, and you just have 20 devices. In such a scenario, maybe a private wireless network might be an overkill, because maybe it gets too expensive or too complicated for such a small terminal. But the moment you start talking about more than 200, 300,000 TEU, or a huge location, or with a lot of plan of digitalization with digital twin, maybe drones or automation, etc., then private wireless networks make sense. Because a lot of people make the mistake of comparing private wireless versus public as the same. So they are not two apples, it's apples and oranges, right? So the private wireless is a more sophisticated solution for more advanced digitalization vision. And sometimes the public LTE network is simply for basic coverage. So what, let's say, a service provider will simply do is put one or two extra base stations at the port, but that's it. You will not, let's say, have your own data is always remaining local. You will not have your own customization, etc., etc. So that's the main difference.
That's really interesting thoughts, Venki. Well, now you share this comparison between private and public network, but when it comes to comparing 4G, LTE, these days 5G, you hear 5G everywhere.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and the first thought people coming into, the first thing you get into your mind is the speed of the data transfer. But, as we are currently discussing, this one is not only about the speed. There are many other considerations to be aware of. So can you share some of those?
Sure. So in the telecommunication world, we have something called the 3GPP, which is, let's say, like a standardization body, which what it does is it collects, let's say, different kinds of requirements from the different customers and the vendors and suppliers, etc. And then they standardize a particular technology, which is the same everywhere. Because imagine a scenario where, let's say, you get a different telecommunication solution in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, for example, and then you go to Munich or to India and you have a completely different technology solution and your phone will not work. So that's why they have something which standardizes the technology for mobile communication. And that's where every few years they come with the next generation of technology. So you had GSM or 2G, right? This is where you had simple voice communication. I think 3G came, which had a little more, let's say, pictures, etc. And then LTE, which is what we saw, or 4G. They are the same. This is what we have seen in the last, let's say, 10 years or so. This is where we see more videos, let's say more social media, let's say some video chats, etc., etc. 5G is the next generation of that same evolution. Here, of course, we start speaking for end consumers like us. The most important thing is the speed, because you want to watch, let's say, something on Netflix. Right now, you need Wi-Fi for it, but in the future, you would be able to watch ultra high definition videos, let's say like this, right? But what is interesting also with 5G is that 5G is the first time when 3GPP also took the inputs from the industry, because they realized that industry is now asking for dedicated mobile connectivity, and they started reaching out to industries to say what kind of communication requirements you have. And then we try to identify them in three main categories. One is the bandwidth. So you're talking about gigabit speed for uplink and downlink of data. So video, you have lots of sensor data, you have lots of, let's say, real-time data, etc., etc. So that's one benefit. The second one is ultra low latency. So you talk about autonomous cars, you are talking about robots, you are talking about remote controlling, let's say, quake cranes. And here you need sometimes a latency as low as 5 or 10 milliseconds. The third thing is IoT devices. So right now, we are going in a direction where port terminals might sooner or later have, let's say, thousands and thousands of IoT devices connected to every single container, so that you can see when the container is kept where, how is the condition, are the goods safe, not safe, is the like a reefer monitor, you kind of always are able to see things. And this is the last one where you can deploy millions of IoT equipment into a small location as well. And that's what 5G brings in. And as you can see now, like Nokia, you have a lot of telecommunication companies trying to offer that kind of a solution to different industries. Automotive is one, manufacturing, logistics with ports, aviation is also looking for it. Mining is again a super interesting one. Nokia, for example, is also working with NASA, for example, at deploying, let's say, a private LTE network on the moon, for example, right? So it's exploded in terms of all these different industries that are coming together asking for these solutions.
Awesome, Benki, because I think this is one of the most asked questions. This difference, and it leads us to our next one. And we already talked about the difference between private, public, 4G, LTE, 5G. But when you start talking about IoT, the Internet of Things, we are talking about connectivity. But at the same time, one of the biggest concerns,
yes,
the security aspects it is quite critical. So can you share your thoughts regarding cybersecurity in this case?
Absolutely. We take the whole cybersecurity topic very seriously because if you have followed the news, in the last couple of years, we see more and more cyber terrorism happening with, let's say, hacking of, let's say, critical networking grid or, let's say, essential transportation systems, etc., etc. And ports, for example, is also a very critical, let's say, part of the supply chain for countries, because through that you get, let's say, goods into a country or outside the country. So when you talk about security, the first thing is because we are talking about, let's say, a mobile standardization with 3GPP, there is a certain level of security that you already get because it's the same level of security that we are providing to our service providers, right? So it's already at a higher grade. So it's not, let's say, a generic level security that you will see with, let's say, an office Wi-Fi or a hotel Wi-Fi, but you already are talking about an encryption one. The second thing is a private mobile network means that you need encrypted SIM cards, which can be connected to the devices. So let's say even if you try to connect to my private LTE network or private 5G network, if you don't have the SIM card, you will not be able to jump into that network. And this is the second level of encryption that we also provide to make sure that there is a certain level of security. And the good thing now is that because private networks are all cloud connected, you can send latest security updates and patches through the cloud in real time. So let's say we discovered some new kind of, let's say, hacking that is happening on, let's say, networks, and we immediately work on firefighting it. The good thing is because private wireless networks are deployed with a connection to the cloud, AWS, Azure, etc. The next day when, let's say, a port terminal is switching on the network or connecting it back to the internet, you are able to download the latest security updates, just like you see on your laptop, for example. And that's how we ensure that security is something that is completely taken care of.
Really interesting, and I can say thank you. We can spend a whole day talking about cybersecurity. That's really one of the most critical aspects when considering any type of solutions. And well, we have covered all these concepts and topics, Venki. But what does all this mean for terminal operations? Mm-hmm. You know what you're looking to solve with all this.
So what we are trying to support, right, is when we speak with a lot of executives of, let's say, global container terminal companies, we usually see them having a digital transformation agenda. They say that over time, I want more electrification. I want to reduce the carbon footprint. I want to have more and more of my quay cranes automated. I want to have more real-time visibility of my operations, etc. Right? And when you look at these kind of requirements, they of course are then speaking with application suppliers or application partners. They are speaking with, let's say, crane manufacturers, for example, on how automation will take place. Sometimes what they miss out is that you can buy a Ferrari, but if you don't have the kind of highway or a road which is made for Ferrari, you will not be able to drive it, right? So in 5 years' time, let's say you have thousands of devices, you have automation equipment which are looking for ultra low latency, but you don't have the supporting underlying communication network, then that vision will not be fulfilled. And that's exactly the journey where we come in. So we join a lot of the terminals and try to understand what their digital vision is. They say that, we want digital twin, so that at any point, let's say, our operating officers are able to figure out when ships are coming in, how do I decrease my cost per move, how do I increase the number of moves per hour, etc., etc. And then we break it down into what use cases it comes down to, let's say automation or better TOS connectivity, more sensors, better video camera surveillance, blah, blah, blah. And then we say, okay, you need this. That means you would need a network which supports so. And this is the network design that will solve your requirement for the next 5 years, for example. And we have some experiences of doing this as well. So we deploy such projects in Asia, in Middle East, in Europe, also in the US and Latin America. So we have some experience of deploying the solution already at a lot of container terminals across the world.
Yeah, and before jumping into these examples, Venki, we had discovered that sometimes what you define as digital transformation is not the same in other or for other customer, for example.
Yeah.
But for you, what is digital transformation in simple words?
So for me, digital transformation is anything that helps any industry achieve their business KPIs. At the end, that's that. There are a lot of fancy things that we speak about, but I believe digital transformation is not having drones just because that's the cool thing these days, or having virtual reality, augmented reality because that's the cool thing these days. Digital transformation really means, is the innovation I'm trying to implement in a digital way helping me improve my business KPI, whether it is cost, quality, efficiency. And for me, that's what digital transformation is. Of course, as you nicely mentioned, every industry will have a different flavor for it. So a logistics service provider in a warehouse might see it differently than a port terminal, or let's say an airport operator, right? But at the end, all of them are trying to do it to make sure that their business drivers are positively impacted, right? And that's what, for me, the digital transformation would be.
Really interesting. Basically using technology as an enabler.
Exactly.
To achieve KPIs. Really, really interesting. And Benkin, can you share some of these examples you were mentioning? What did you did? What was the experience?
Absolutely. So I can give you examples of a couple of our projects which are public. There are many non-public projects as well, but one example I can give is with SSA Marine. It's quite a big terminal operator in the Americas, both Latin America as well as North America. And we deployed at their Seattle terminal a private wireless solution. Their initial use case was for improved terminal operating system connectivity, the TOS connectivity, and they are in the future looking at also connecting more devices, whether it is camera surveillance or let's say automated cranes or IoT related solutions. That's one. What we also are doing is working with some of the industrial giants like Kalmar, for example, in trying to make sure that their automation solutions are supported by our solution. So with Kalmar, we have a very good collaboration, and we deployed a dedicated private LTE and also a 5G network at their headquarter location in Tampere in Finland, where we work with their technical team to understand what level of latency is needed, what kind of connectivity is needed, and try to adapt our system for it. And it helped later on, because when you're deploying, let's say, a Kalmar crane at any of the locations at a terminal, it will already be pre-configured or let's say already tested with, let's say, a Nokia solution. And that's how we are also trying to help the industry.
That's really interesting, because especially in our maritime industry, there is no room for, you need to have a proven solution. That's reality.
Yes, exactly.
That's reality, and that's good that you are deploying these in many regions worldwide. And Benki, to jump into the final question, how would you see the technology evolving in the upcoming year or in the near future?
So I do believe, I think different parts of the world have the evolution from LTE to 5G, which will take some place. So for example, I think in US or in Europe, we already are talking about 5G. In some countries, let's say in Middle East Africa or Asia or Latin America, I think 5G will come a little later. So at least just from a communication networking solution point of view, I think LTE and 5G in the private wireless forms will remain for the next, let's say, 10 years. What will change is port terminals will identify more and more use cases, because a lot of times you need to have a solution in place for you to think about more ideas of what all you can do. So if I know that I have a private 5G deployment at a particular terminal, I will say, hang on, why am I connecting all my cameras with a wire? Why can't I just put them connected to my 5G network with a SIM card? Or hang on, why can't I do, let's say, inventory mapping with, let's say, drones instead of someone manually checking these containers, etc. So that's why I see in the next 5 to 10 years, more and more container terminals will switch to more, let's say, reliable connectivity solution like private wireless network. And more terminals will also identify additional use cases to make the business case even more positive. So they will say, not just 2 use cases, let me try to put 10 use cases now, because the network that I need is already there. Why not use it for even more things than just the 2 things I originally planned for?
Yeah, you mentioned 2 interesting topics here. And I can say that the first one is that how to include different use cases on on one investment, so to say.
Exactly.
And I can also say that you should consider how technology will be evolving. So if there are elements you can put in place since now, that will be great. And
exactly.
you will be able to save some cost there. And well, Venki, as a final remarks, what would you like to share with our audience that is currently running an operation? They are hearing about all this digital transformation. What will be your 3 main takeaways for them?
So I would definitely say the number 1 would be digital transformation should not be a buzzword or just a fancy word because everyone is using it. It should really come from concrete business use. Because if you don't have that, you will not be able to get to the business case, which means that the innovation will not last longer. The second thing is telecommunication world has become simpler for enterprises and especially for terminal operators. So it's not this complicated telecommunication world of the past. You have solutions now which can be as small as fitting into a suitcase, and they are really built now for your specific industry without a lot of complication. And the third thing is a vision would be important. So when you speak about digital transformation, of course, look at the business benefits, but also look at what you want to do over the next 5 years, 7 years, and make a roadmap saying, these are my, let's say, 15 use cases. These are my initial most urgent 3 use cases that help me bring the business case. But in the next 3 years, I want to implement this. Then over the next 5 years, so and so that you have one huge digital strategy for your terminal operation. And everything at the end will be connected back to how do you reduce the cost per move and how do you improve the moves per hour. That's the only KPI that we should try to strive towards.
Really interesting. I really like your third one. The third option is quite part of my day-to-day on how can I support, at least from the design point of view, so you can enable a future, digital transformation or a future automation or a future improvement in eco-efficiency. So that's really interesting. How can you create this type of roadmaps and make all the investments, so to say, to make all those make sense. So really interesting, Venki, and it was really a pleasure to have you here. Hope you can join future sessions, and I really appreciate you got this time, especially on your so busy agenda.
Thanks a lot, Chris, for being such a good listener and asking such thought-provoking questions. I love the way you break down complex topics for outsiders like us about the terminals, as well as for insiders in the industry about, let's say, telecommunication topics or other complex topics. So all the best. Keep continuing with these great episodes. And once again, thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks, Venki, and stay safe.
Yeah, you too. Bye.